Здравствуйте, друзья! Продолжаем читать роман Джоан Роуллинг «Гарри Поттер и философский камень». Глава 1, часть 3. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the baker's. He eyed them angrily as he passed. He didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. This lot were whispering excitedly, too, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large doughnut in a bag, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. "The Potters, that's right. That's what I heard. Yes, their son, hurry!" Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whisperers, as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, snapped at his secretary not to disturb him, seized his telephone and had almost finished dialing his home number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his mustache, thinking. No, he was being stupid. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. He was sure there were lots of people called Potter who had a son called Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He'd never even seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold. There was no point in worrying Mrs. Dursley. She always got so upset at any mention of her sister. He didn't blame her if he'd had a sister like that. But all the same, those people in cloaks. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on drills that afternoon, and when he left the building at 5 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. "Sorry," he grunted, as the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. It was a few seconds before Mr. Dursley realized that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He didn't seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile, and he said in a squeaky voice that made passers-by stare, "Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy, happy day." And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle and walked off. Mr. Dursley stood rooted to the spot. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he had been called a muggle, whatever that was. He was rattled. He hurried to his car and set off home, hoping he was imagining things which he had never hoped before, because he didn't approve of imagination. Давайте разберем прочитанное. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks. Он вовсе позабыл уже о людях в мантиях. Until he passed a group of them. Пока он не прошел через группу таких людей, next to the baker's, рядом с булочной. He eyed them angrily. Он смотрел на них злобно, as he passed, пока он проходил. He didn't know why, он не знал почему, but they made him uneasy. Но они заставляли его беспокоиться. This lot were whispering excitedly too. Эта группа людей также увлеченно шепталась, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. Но он не мог увидеть ни одной коробки для сборов. It was on his way back past them. Это было на его пути назад, через них. Clutching a large doughnut in a bag, неся большой пончик в пакете, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. Когда он услышал или поймал несколько слов того, что они говорили. The Potters, that's right, that's what I heard. Поттеры, это точно, это то, что я слышал. Yes, their son, Harry. Да, их сын, Гарри. Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Мистер Дурсли остановился в смертельном ужасе. Fear flooded him. Страх наполнил его. He looked back at the whisperers. Он посмотрел назад на шептальщиков. As if he wanted to say something to them. Вроде как он хотел им что-то сказать. But thought better of it. Но придумал кое-что получше. He dashed back across the road. Он кинулся через дорогу назад. Hurried up to his office. Поспешил в свой офис. Snapped at his secretary not to disturb him. Прикрикнул на секретаря, чтобы его не беспокоили. Seized his telephone. Схватил телефон. And had almost finished dialing his home number. И почти уже закончил дозваниваться по своему домашнему номеру. When he changed his mind. Когда он передумал. He put the receiver back down. Он положил телефон обратно. And stroked his mustache. И погладил свои усы. Thinking. Думая. No, he was being stupid. Нет, он был дураком. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. Поттер — это не такое необычное имя. He was sure there were lots of people called Potter. Он был уверен, что было много людей, которых зовут Поттер, who had a son called Harry, у которых есть сын по имени Гарри. Come to think of it. Давайте подумаем об этом. He wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. Он не был даже уверен, что его племянника звали Гарри. He'd never even seen the boy. Он никогда и не видел парня раньше. It might have been Harvey or Harold. Это мог бы быть Харви или Гарольд. There was no point in worrying Mrs. Dursley. Не было никакого смысла беспокоить миссис Дурсли. She always got so upset at any mention of her sister. Она всегда так расстраивалась при любом упоминании о ее сестре. He didn't blame her. Он не винил ее. If he'd had a sister like that. Если б у него была такая сестра. But all the same, those people in cloaks. Но все же, те люди в мантиях. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on drills that afternoon. Он понял, что ему сложно концентрироваться на дрелях этим днем. And when he left the building at 5 o'clock, и когда он покинул здание в 5 часов, he was still so worried, он был все еще так взволнован, that he walked straight into someone just outside the door, что он врезался в кого-то прямо на выходе из двери. Sorry, he grunted. Извините, пробурчал он. As the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. Маленький старый человек споткнулся и чуть не упал. It was a few seconds before Mr. Dursley realized. Это было за несколько секунд до того, как мистер Дурсли понял, that the man was wearing a violet cloak, что на человеке была надета фиолетовая мантия. He didn't seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. Он не выглядел расстроенным от того, что чуть не упал на землю. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile. А напротив, его лицо расплылось в широкой улыбке. And he said in a squeaky voice, и он сказал скрипучим голосом, that made passers-by stare, что заставляло прохожих оглядываться, хотя stare — это пристально смотреть. Don't be sorry, my dear sir. Не извиняйтесь, мой дорогой. For nothing could upset me today. Ничего меня сегодня не расстроит. Rejoice. Радуйтесь, веселитесь. For you know who has gone at last. Так как вы знаете, кто, наконец, исчез. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating. Даже маглы, как вы, должны праздновать that happy, happy day. Этот счастливый, счастливый день. And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle. И старый человек обнял мистера Дурсли посерединке, то есть за талию, and walked off, и ушел. Mr. Dursley stood rooted to the spot. Мистер Дурсли стоял, словно прирос к месту. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. Он был обнят непонятным чужаком. He also thought he had been called a muggle. А еще он подумал, что его назвали маглом, whatever that was, что бы это ни было. He was rattled. Он был потрясен. He hurried to his car and set off home. Он поспешил в машину и отправился домой. Hoping he was imagining things. Надеясь, что он просто вообразил все эти вещи. Which he had never hoped before. О чем он раньше никогда не надеялся, так как не воображал. Because he didn't approve of imagination. Потому что он не одобрял воображение. На этом заканчивается третья часть. Спасибо за внимание. Счастливо!